Now we're ready to roll. Okay. Thank you very much. So, just to go through the overview of what the Torah portion is about, because it's all Torah, it's all God's Torah. But as I say, a lot of it is arcane for us. But then I'll tell you what we're actually going to be speaking about.
But what do you mean arcane for us?
There is talking about, as we'll see, we'll mention, there are certain things that we've never experienced, we don't experience, and it's hard we just have verbal descriptions of them. I'm going to call that arcane, a little bit out of our normal reach. I'll explain to you right now. The Torah portions of Tazria and Mitzorah continue the discussion of the laws of Tumah V'Tar, ritual impurity and purity. So the whole idea of ritual purity and impurity is itself kind of ethereal. Not arcane necessarily, but ethereal in the sense that you don't see the difference in a loaf of bread or in a person between purity and impurity. It's just a spiritual concept, which also has much less impact in today's days without a temple than it used to have. A woman who was given birth should undergo a process of purification, which includes immersing in a mikveh, a naturally gathered pool of water, and bringing offerings to the holy temple. All male infants are to be circumcised on the 8th day of life. Those are relevant today. A lot of the Torah portions are devoted to the idea of what we call tzarat, often mistranslated as leprosy, because it's not that. It is a supernatural, I would have called it supernatural, I'm not sure exactly the difference, plague that can afflict people as well as garments or homes. If white or pink patches appear on a person's skin, dark pink or dark green in garments or homes, I assume you haven't seen that because I haven't. A Kohen is summoned. The judgment may vary signs, such as an increase in size of the afflicted area after a 7-day quarantine. The Kohen pronounces it tameh, impure, or tahor, pure. The person afflicted with sarat must dwell alone outside of the camp or city until he or she is healed. The afflicted area in a garment or home must be removed. If the sarat recurs, the entire garment or home must be destroyed. When the mitzorah, means the person who has sarat heals, he or she is purified by the Kohen with a special procedure involving 2 birds, spring water, an earthen vessel, a piece of cedar wood, a scarlet thread, and a bundle of hyssop. We're not going to call that arcane, but it's a little bit out of our reach. Ritual impurity is also engendered through a seminal or other discharge of the man or menstruation, through or other discharge of blood in a woman, necessitating purification through immersion in a mikveh. Okay, so now I just want to talk about this a little bit. Actually, not about this. Tell you what we're going to be talking about. The Talmud tells us that explains what this is. Let's put aside what we just read. Imagine if every time I said something disrespectful to someone, I hurt someone's feelings, I grew a pimple on my nose. Let's say that. That would be annoying. It would also actually be very helpful for my own character development, because the chances are that sometimes trying to be funny, cute, whatever, I might have offended someone and I have no idea. Or I maybe think I ruffled their feathers a little bit and I don't realize the extent of what it was. So the pimple on my nose is staring me in the face as I look in the mirror and says, I got a problem. I wouldn't have known. I hadn't noticed. And so, as annoying as that would be, it would actually be a gift to my own character development, making me stop, to pause, to soak in something I've been doing that's counterproductive. And I'm using speech as an example. Anything I'm doing. This tzarat idea, it was a lesion. It could have been on the skin. It could have been on the clothing. It could have been on the house. And what it symbolized were certain dysfunctions, misbehaviors in a person's life. One of them, and the one that's most famous in our, even though the Talmud mentions a bunch of different types of possible misbehaviors like that, the one that's most focused on is damaging or hurtful speech. So when a person had this, and it wasn't, so people call it a leprosy. Leprosy is a medical condition. You don't need a Cohen for that. You need a doctor for that. This was a condition which they knew it was the equivalent of what I said with the pimple on the nose. They looked at it and they said, uh-oh, this may be a sign to me of my own misbehavior. Now, they needed a connoisseur, a caring connoisseur of spirituality and a psycho-spiritual growth and of this skin condition to come check it out. That would be the Kohen. The Kohens were the loving shepherds of the people. So the Kohen, if the Kohen declared, yes, this is Sarat, they needed to go outside the town for a week, it'd be 13 days to be able to, and then go to the mikveh to purify themselves. What was the point of the seclusion? If they have been hurtful to others with their speech, and thank God they got the gift of this skin lesion or or on their body or on their clothing or on their house, which called their attention. Now it's time for them to say, okay, I'm part of a society. I should appreciate being part of society. Let me think this through and come back with a healthier frame of mind. That is the general idea of tzaras. And so I say, even though there are a bunch of 7 different types of misbehaviors that the Talmud points to as causes of this spiritual, bodily reflection of a spiritual malady, the most focus is on hurtful speech. So when I talk about this, just to share with you, maybe 25, 30 years ago, a local friend here asked me to join him at a breakfast to benefit an organization helping severely challenged, neurologically challenged children. I don't remember what it was called. And a young lady stood up. Yeah, but now we're not on any page yet. So and this young lady spoke about her child, who was, I think, 5, 6, had very serious mobility challenges and very serious verbal expression challenges. And she says that one day she saw her child struggle to walk across the room to her. And she said, I couldn't help because I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to let her try. And it took her quite a while, but she made it across the room. And then I saw her struggling to say words. And what she said was, I love you. So I was in my 20s, but I had little kids also. So, but I was thinking, she said, I just want to pause right there. We all say thousands and thousands of words a day without effort and often without thought. My child was able to struggle to get her first 3 words out, and they were, I love you. So I want you to think about the gift of communication that we all take for granted because it comes so easily, and talk about, the beauty of what we can do, of gifts of our words, and the damage that, God forbid, we can do. That's what today's conversation is going to focus on, because this malady, skin malady, is teaching us about a malady. It's also teaching us about the power of words. And often what we're saying is negative and destructive, and a lot of it goes about gossip and stuff like that. That's one thing. But let's take another example. The Torah tells us that it's a mitzvah to criticize. Why is it a mitzvah to criticize? That doesn't, criticism, we don't like critics. It doesn't feel good. Yeah, similar to what I said before about the pimple on the nose. What if someone walked in here and they had the mustache on their lip? It may be uncomfortable to tell them you have, scrambled eggs on your lip. But if I care about them, I'm going to tell them. Because why should I let them go out? It has to be like that. That's not called criticism. It's called calling attention to something that's you don't want to project that. So someone is sitting here and says something that I think was, or I have reason to believe was offensive to someone else, and I see they don't even realize, or maybe they do realize, then really, in a nice way, in a calm way, not in public, if I care about that person, to call that to their attention and say, I don't know if you realize this, but that really, it didn't land well. Because, I don't think most people want to be obnoxious. Or want to be seen that way. So the easiest thing is not to say anything, not to get involved. But what the Torah is saying, and it says it together with care about your fellow. And we'll call it criticize, but call to their attention things they really need to know. They're apparently not seeing. It's like the pimple on the nose. Now, that's constructive speech. If I walked over to someone after and quietly and I couched it and just said, just giving you my feedback. I know you're a good guy. I'm just telling you this is the way I heard it, the way I perceived it. It's never totally comfortable, but I do my best. Contrast that with saying, here in front of everyone, you schmuck, why did you speak that way? I called his attention. But one's in a way that's acceptable, and one way it's denigrating, it's condescending, it's embarrassing. One is constructive speech, one is destructive speech. And sometimes they can really be two sides of the same coin. It could be the same message, it's just how you put it across. And that is really what we're talking about today, the power of speech, the tendency we have to meander into not such constructive speech, and how there's a real treasure in analyzing our speech to make sure, to look and say, I have X amount of hours in the day, days in my life. I have X amount of words. I want to use them to build and to be positive, constructive, and not, God forbid, the opposite. Okay. So let's get back to the text. And again, I juggled them just to hello. Okay. So here they have a graphic. That's Karat. My battery is running low.
Right, you're charging now.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Maybe this is the right one. Okay. This is above my pay grade. Hang on a second. Just gonna plug this in to see, make sure. See if I can avoid this going out. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. It worked.
Okay, yes, it's charging.
Good. Thank you. We were successful this time. Okay. It says a punishment for sin, and that's one way of putting it. But again, choosing words. What I just told you really was it was it was a reflection, a physical reflection of a spiritual malady, which was a favor to us. So we called attention. Oops, what did I do? What did I say today? It was a trigger for self-examination. Tzarat, lesions appeared on surfaces such as skin, hair, clothing, and even walls. Okay. So in this week's Torah portion, it tells us that as we're going to go, the Jews are going to go into Israel because they're being prepared to go into Israel, and they're going to create a society. There's going to be this idea of tzarat, and if you want to have a society, you got to make sure that our communication is constructive and not, God forbid, destructive. Now, I want to take this back a little bit to frame this Torah-wise. The Jews are going into the land of Canaan, Israel. Eventually, it's Israel. It's called Israel. When God speaks to Abraham and Sarah, they are in Israel. He has told them to go to Israel. This one is going to be okay. I'll tell you what this again. I'm jumping around. This is going to be on page 28, 5A.
5A.
5A. But I'll read it soon. I just want to frame this first. God is talking to Abraham and Sarah. They are in Israel. He has told them to go to Israel, to Canaan, and says, this will be the land of your family. This will be your land, your Israel. He forecasts to them, you will be slaves of a foreign nation. 400 years, he says. And then he says, the fourth generation will return here. Your children will eventually come back to Canaan.
What time do I have to be back?
I don't know yet.
Okay, you'll text me.
Okay.
Why don't you wait 5 minutes?
Okay. Hang on a second.
Tell me how long I have to wait, so. Oh, wait.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Okay. Okay. All right. So the he says what God tells Abraham is something about the Amorites and their iniquity will not be complete until then, which is very cryptic in what he's telling Abraham and Sarah. What he's telling Abraham and Sarah is that there are currently 7 nations inhabiting Canaan, Israel. They are nations who each have a very deep corruption to them. And God is telling them, it tells Abraham and Sarah, when your period of slavery ends, you will come inherit the land, and they can either live in peace with you. If they don't, you will take the land. But I'm going to wait until I, God, feel comfortable saying you 7 nations, you have relinquished your right to the land because of your psycho-spiritual corruption. So he's saying the 4th generation will return here. This is important framing because the Amorites are going to be part of this, are essential part of today's conversation. The iniquity, in other words, the Amorites, their level of corruption will not have reached its point until when you're going to have to wait for that until you get into Israel. The iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete until then. Now, the Amorites are only one of 7 nations, but he's highlighting what we call the Amori in Hebrew. They're transliterating as the Amorites. And on this, we have Rashi. He explains, for the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete. They would not deserve to be sent out of their land until then. This is because God does not punish a nation until its measure is full. By telling these 7 nations that either they live in peace with the Jews or they're going to have to leave. God is saying, I'm not going to just do that to people. It's if they don't deserve the land, you will replace them. I have to wait until their evil has reached a level where they deserve to be replaced. Okay, so God is forecasting that there is these 7 nations, and specifically the Amorites, who have misbehavior, and the Jews will eventually take over Israel, Abraham's children, right? That will be Joshua and so on. Text 6, also on 29, says, this is from one of the great commentator from the 1700s. He says, the measure of the Amorites filled before the others. Out of the 7 nations, the Amorites, they did they were a little precocious in their evil, and their measure of evil filled before the others. And that's why Moses captured their lands while the other nations were not conquered until later in Joshua's reign. The Amorites were actually on the eastern bank, and the Torah talks about how Moses, before he died, captured the lands of the Amorites. So from the 7 nations, we're going to be dealing with the Amorite nations here. Again, the Jews, when they settle in the land, one of the things they're going to have is now this phenomenon of tzarat, this legions, and in capturing the land, the first ones they captured were the Amorites.
I see a contradiction here.
Yeah.
Okay. If the treasure caused the legions,
Which treasure caused the legion?
text 6. If the treasure
It doesn't-
was the cause of the legion,
It doesn't say text 6. Measure.
then
It doesn't
wouldn't the
say
treasure,
treasure. It says measure.
huh?
It says measure. In text 6, where does it say treasure? In text 6?
Okay. At some point over here, it says the treasure
We're
is
not up to
hidden in the
that.
walls.
We're not up to that yet.
Okay. But it strikes me that if the treasure caused the legions, wouldn't the treasure be impure?
Not necessarily. No, it wouldn't be. But we're not up to the treasure part yet. Okay.
Wouldn't have the pink and white spots. It would be fun.
Only for that pink and white spots, exactly.
Yeah.
Here we're saying that there was but there is definitely a treasure idea here, but I wasn't up to it yet. So, so now we'll go to number 4, which would be text 2a on 24. And that's Rashi on this week's Torah portion. I will place a legion of tzarat. And I just want this, we're going to string all this together, but the idea is that they are going into the Moses, God tells Abraham, they will conquer the Canaan, and it specifies out of the 7 nations, the Amorites. And we see in the Torah that Moses conquered them first before Joshua went in and conquered the rest of the land. Now, when it comes to this week's Torah portion about the legions, it says, I will place a legion of tzarat. From the language of the Torah, it's almost like a gift. Why is tzarat a gift? The notification that will be struck by legions is a happy tiding. Why? Because the Amorites concealed treasures of gold in the walls of their homes for the 40 years the Jews were in the desert. Everybody knew about the prophecy to Abraham. So they knew eventually that the Jews were coming back to the land of Abraham and Sarah. When they were coming back, because they were afraid what happens when the Jews come, they concealed the treasures of gold in the walls of their home.
Why did Abraham and Sarah adopted Canaan as their land?
God told them to.
But they originally came from somewhere else.
From Turkey. The first communication of God to Abraham and Sarah is leave your birthplace, your home, and your homeland and your homes, and go to the land which I will show you, which is the land of Canaan. God sent them to Canaan. That's
become their.
And he says, this will be your land and land for your descendants. Okay. So, and maybe if there were still Amorites, maybe they could take us to the world courts. But there aren't any.
Here I have an issue.
Yeah.
Abraham and Sarah obviously were not Jews. Many generations after became Jewish at the Moses time.
Yeah.
And at the end, God, told Moses to send his people to become Jewish lands, but originally Abraham and Sarah, who were not Jewish, still were sent to the same land.
No, they were not Jewish in the sense that you were Jewish, but they were Hebrews. They were definitely they were what we would call the pre-Jews, the closest thing pre-Sinai, and God told them that you will have a nation of multitudes, children, descendants, and they will get this land.
One of the Abraham's sons was
No, he says to Abraham and Sarah,
right, Abraham's son, so their children,
their child. Yeah.
not Ishmael.
No. So, and here, when there was the lesions, it's if there was a lesion, they had to actually, and it was persisted, they had to destroy the home. So it says when homeowners demolished their homes due to lesions, they found the treasure. So here you have kind of another weird element here. Okay, we come to Israel. First to the land of the Amorites. Now we have the Tzaraat thing. And if there's Tzaraat in the house, that means I'm doing something wrong. Then the Torah hints to us that there's actually a gift in this. Why? Because if you demolish the home, that's how they found the hidden treasures of gold. What's this all telling us? So now let's get into it. One of the great early commentators on the Torah is, oops, whoa, I just messed that up. Okay. Because this is text 10a, 32 at the bottom. This is a medieval commentator. He says the sin of the Amorite. In the Hebrew, it's really, you can't miss it. That the nation is called the Amori. We call the Amorite. Amor, lemor, it means to speak. So the sin of the Amorite is the sin of negative speech. So what this people represents, they were real people, but they had real problems. And what they represent for us, even though they no longer exist, is the Amori, the speech, negative speech. So the Torah is setting us up now from God telling Abraham that going into the land to create a society, what they need, their first step is going to be to establish a psychologically, interpersonally healthy fabric. And that starts from be careful what you say. Because hitting someone is clearly, can't do that. And people say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But words do harm. Words hurt. And with a simple word to someone, saying, just seemingly benign, if they just spoke publicly or threw a party, and I mentioned, that I was there and someone made a comment, not a terrible comment, but a comment that undermined the value of the speech they made or the party they threw. All of a sudden, that guy or that woman feels a little less about, like, why would that guy say that about me? It could be something I said, I didn't mean it. I just said just a word. We say things, why did God create water coolers? We just talk. That speech is what the Torah is talking about. Obviously, if I stand up and say, go burn that guy's house down, that's easily identifiable negative speech. But there's a lot that we have to think about, which passes for just benign chatter, which can be very damaging. And that's what we often call lashon hara, which means gossip. And in the words of the Talmud, your average person doesn't go through the day without at least a smidgen of that. It's not saying as something you should do, it's just a reality because we talk. Why do we talk? Because we want to interact. Sometimes we don't have that much to talk about. So what do? You talk about people. That always works. Or it doesn't. Okay, so let's talk about this speech idea, and that's really where we're going. This is from Maimonides. The change that affected clothes and houses, which the Torah described with the general term tzarat, this is text 7, which in the book would be page 30, is not a natural occurrence. Instead, it is a sign and a wonder prevalent among the Jewish people to warn them against lashon hara, gossip, or sinful speech, negative speech. Tzarat isolates the gossipers, making it known, because I told you they had to sit outside town for a little while until they achieved their purity. It gave them time to think, and it said, I'm not a healthy part of society because I'm talking too much in a negative way. Making it known they must remain alone to abstain from the conversations of the wicked, which are folly and harmful speech. In this text 8b, which is on page 31, it's just a quote from King Solomon in Proverbs. Sin is unavoidable when there are many words. The wise seal their lips. Now, it doesn't mean that we should all have, oath of silence. You got to talk. Not speaking is also antisocial. But we don't speak just to fill the air. We choose our words so there's something constructive in it. Because often, when there isn't something constructive, we can gravitate either to talking about the person who just left the room, or did you hear what this was doing, or what they see what they were wearing, or whatever it is. And that stuff may feel benign, but it hurts. And this is from the Rebbe. Thought is a vehicle and servant of intellect and emotions. This is text 9, which is on page 32. Even if it does not serve intellect or feelings, it continues to function, think, and meditate. However, this activity is not only devoid of content, but also open to depravity. Depravity is a strong word. If we're talking about words, I would use something a little more measured, but the idea is that we're always thinking. And sometimes we're focusing on something, and otherwise we're just thinking. And if just not guiding my thoughts in a constructive place can bring me to places that aren't the healthiest. Depends where my emotions are. It is explained that alien or evil thoughts are caused by the mind's emptiness. When the mind is occupied, the thought has something to serve. And there's no room for, again, stupid is a harsh wording. That's not, means, folly. Thoughts of folly, devoid of substance. What the Rebbe is saying here, and what he's quoting from Jewish ethicists over the millennia, is that we can't stop thinking. And you think you can't control your thoughts, but you actually can control where to put your thoughts. And I'll share it again. I know what happened in my life. My first time, there was 30 years ago, I had to go for a series of MRIs over several years. And the first time I went to an MRI, I discovered something about myself, which is that I'm claustrophobic. I had no idea, but I found out the hard way. I came out sweating. I was really very uncomfortable in that tube. I don't know if any of you have been there. I had a panic button. I had too much pride to hit the panic button because I was like 25 years old. Like, what am I afraid of? I'm in Chatham. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not buried alive, but I had a panic inside of me. The next time I went in prepared with things I wanted to think about. Either reviewing by heart and I did. And I was observing myself. I was calm, but when I finished one concept and I to shift to the next one, and I looked up and I saw where I was and I heard the pounding, I felt the panic coming up. So I just focused on the next thing, and everything settled. And when I came out, I felt like I had conquered something. I'm sure I still have that in me, but that it was coming from just allowing my thoughts to, oh my gosh, where am I? Whatever, and putting my thoughts in a constructive place. I didn't stop my thoughts, I guided them. And what Hasidic thought is very into is guiding our thoughts in the proper place. Not just because I saw a sign, a highway sign, doesn't mean that's what my thoughts have to go. Or I saw a movie or whatever. My thoughts are, I'm not a servant of my thoughts. My thoughts are a servant of me. And I'm not going to stop thinking, but I can control where they are. And that's what this is about. Obviously, we're talking about speech, but it starts with thoughts. And in text 10b, we have here from the founder of Chabad. He quotes, here he's going to quote something which is more Kabbalistic. And again, I don't really go for their translation, but with some details of it, in general, it's okay. But what he's saying is that the Kabbalah teaches us that there are forces within us that have a real identity. There's a part of us, we call it an evil inclination. It's like, in the cartoons, they used to have like an angel on one shoulder and a little devil on the other shoulder. I don't think I have a devil in me, but there's the point is that there is, God implanted us with a gravitational pull to things that aren't so great. And that's negativity. And so we have the power within us for positivity. And we have to, and this is central to Chabad thought, is to recognize that we have two forces in us. We're not schizophrenic in that sense, but we can go in different directions. And we have the power to drive the bus and to decide which part of me fills my thoughts, guides my speech, and shows itself in behaviors. And here, the Amori part, the Amorite part, again, Amori means to speak, but it's the idle, negative, destructive chatter. So look in text 10b, which is 33. The Amori represents aimless chatter and foreign thoughts for us and the Jewish people. And in the words of the Zohar, the Kabbalah, speaking too many words indicates stupidity. Again, I think stupidity is not a word we've chosen, but too many words, it means that there's a thoughtlessness. The Amori represent energy that hails from the wrong side, the side of impure energies that disturb Israel. So what it means is it's a part of me that just says, right now, I can't think of anything constructive to say. I don't want to look like I don't want a dead air. So maybe the best thing I can say is, I heard some good, I heard some nice gossip about what someone in the office is doing. That always makes me interesting, right? If you can come up with that. The Amori do not merely drive us to aimless talk; they also drive us to foreign thoughts. All speech begins in the heart. In other words, it comes from how we feel and how we think. With a mind thinking mindless thoughts that are foreign to Jews because they don't belong to God. And again, within the Hasidic ideal, it's either constructive or it's what's called the other side. It's not it's wrong. It may not be horrible and evil, but if it's not constructive, and constructive could mean us, if 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 I'm talking to Gennady, and our relationship is something that's an important thing, and us talking about Russian football or something like that, or but something that's maybe not talking about curing cancer, but it's part of something that's not hurting anyone. It's not empty, and it's a relationship building. That's fine, because the focus is on building our relationship. But just so we know what is not meant for constructive, just speak for the sake of speaking, that aimless talk usually takes us in the wrong direction. The word emori, which means to speak, but it's in the current tense, implies constancy. It refers to an impure energy that drives us to constant chatter. It's the idea that I have to keep speaking. I don't have to keep speaking. The ancient and sane king traps us into thinking foreign thoughts and speaking empty words, for sin is the inevitable companion of too many words. We must remove this power from the memory by deliberately avoiding foreign thoughts and empty words. Instead, we must constantly think godly words. We want to think about positive things. Now, in text 11a, which is from the Talmud, it's on page 34. Again, we want to take this all with balance. Here's a quote from a leader of the Jewish people, Shimon, the son of Gamliel, and he would say, I was raised among Torah scholars all my life. I have found nothing better for the body than silence. Speech is not essential. Deed is critical. Those who speak excessively bring on sin. He was a leader. He didn't walk around without speaking. Of course he spoke. But there's exercising silence when there's nothing constructive to say, so there's nothing better. The power of being able to be silent and to be able to be comfortable in the silence. In text 11b, we find a rabbi from Israel who went to Babylonia. Babylonia was the America of the time, in that in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Actually, that whole millennia from the first century on. He came to Babylonia, and Israel was the West. In the West, they say, a word for one coin, but silence for 2 coins. Silence is more valuable than the word. And then, oops, I'm sorry, then to that 11b. And then we're going to go to 11c, which is Maimonides. And here he's talking about this in his laws of the Tzarat. And he's talking about there also the idea of negative speech and destructive speech. And here he says, and in contrast, the speech of proper Jewish people is always focused on the words of Torah and wisdom. And obviously, Torah and wisdom, but it also applies to even relationship building. That's fine. That's positive speech. Therefore, God assists in this endeavor and grants the merit because of it. I guess the only problem is that relationship building, we might tell ourselves, well, gossiping is relationship building. Now, that's where you want to keep it positive. So now we get to try to understand. The Rebbe says, so now let's try to understand, what is the Torah telling us? You go to Israel, you conquer the land, you want to have constructive behavior, so you have healthy societies. Someone in their house has not been doing that, has been exercising negative speech, so that their house is showing this lesion to the extent that they have to destroy it. And now they find treasure in it. What is that, a reward for negative speech? The Rebbe is saying is, the Torah is saying is that there's treasure to be found in speech. It's not just shutting up is not the point. It's using your words and realizing that your words can be a tremendous gift. You say something nice, affirming, validating, supportive to someone today, you have no idea what it could mean to them. What does it cost you? Some thought and a few words. So it's the consciousness that comes to those who have been faced with the fact that they have destructive speech. It gives them a treasure. The treasure isn't stopping to speak. The treasure is recognizing what a powerful force you have in communication. And yes, it hurt other people, but now turn it around. And here's what the Rebbe is saying. Conversely, the hidden treasures of gold were found uniquely in Amorite homes, where it had these were homes inhabited by people who had this corruption of how they spoke, bad communication, destructive communication, and now a Jew is living over there, and they're also showing it. So why is there a treasure? Because the ultimate purpose of the Tzarat lesions was not merely to neutralize and prevent the chatter of the wicked. It was to transform the human power of speech. It wasn't just to nullify that. It was to teach us a lesson like that lady taught me 25 years ago. She's saying, you have words to speak. My child can barely get out a few words. And look what she did. And how many words, I remember what was I don't know how many words I say a day, but I'm sure a lot of them are wasted. Rather than negative speech, we should have words and conversations about holy topics. As Jacob said, I snatched it from the Amorites. The Jacob later says something that he took from the Amorites. What does it mean? I took a lesson from the Amorites. Our patriarch Jacob said it. That I saw the destructive power of speech, and I learned what the constructive power could be like. Words and speech that are good and holy reveal the hidden treasures of the soul. And that's text 12. So I think that, especially, we'll end it here, and then I'm going to read the key points. But speech is one thing. We live in, if I was talking about this 25 years ago, I probably would end the conversation here. But living in a world of social media, and which I don't live in that much, but I know enough about it. It really, it gives us the power of communication. It compounds it tremendously. The whole idea of email and the social media, it's injecting steroids into our communication, and it could be into the negativity of it. We have to think before you hit send, because we can do a lot of positive, and we can also do negative, and especially if something is getting heated, rather than show that I can speak, I can shout at a higher decibel level, or I can, write even nastier. That's to bow out and not be part of that. So here are key points. Number one, lesions called tzarat would appear on the walls of people who engaged in sinful speech. If these lesions persisted despite all efforts to clean them, the house had to be demolished. Two, when the house was demolished, homeowners often found hidden treasures buried there by the nations who had resided in Israel before the Jews arrived. Number three, among these nations, the Amorites were the first to lose the land because their sins were particularly vile. Their primary sin was sinful speech. These treasures were found primarily in their homes. Number four, it is ironic that the greatest treasures were buried in the homes of the greatest offenders. It teaches us that when we transform negative speech into positive speech, we uncover hitherto hidden gems of the soul. And a fifth thing, which we didn't have here in the text, one way to avoid negative speech is to walk away. A better way is to direct the mind constantly to constructive and holy subjects, which we did have, which utilizes the power of transformation. Okay. So I don't know if there are any questions.
In the beginning of this section, there were rules, Rashi rules.
Yeah, I didn't read that.
I know.
Yeah.
And rule number 3 says Rashi addresses every textual discrepancy.
Yeah.
Discrepancy in Torah or interpretation of Torah.
It doesn't mean discrepancy. It appears to be a textual discrepancy. What a child would see as a textual discrepancy. He's writing for children.
I see. It's, the
Yeah,
African
yeah, yeah.
language.
They're not careful in their language, I told you.
Mhm.
Okay, any other
Don't close,
questions?
don't close this window, I'm gonna fix the bar.
Can you fix that?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, so
No,
I wish you all a good week.
In essence, the Hansen disease, which we are talking about.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good one.
The
Yes.
lepra, know what we are talking about completely.
Thank you, Rabbi.